On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the place where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Welcome home, Brains.
Coming to you straight from San Diego, California. Let's welcome our host, April Mahoney.
You know, and when that's your poison, oh my God. So
yeah,
my hat is off to you.
thank you.
Well, Brains, we're here on the spot, on the edge with April Mahoney and G.Jay Westbrook.
Yay.
Dr. Carolyn Ross.
Thank you.
I had to dress for battle today, okay? Because we going in on this corona, and I want you to have all your armor. I want you to have your head straight, okay? This is time to strategize. It is not time to fall behind. I bring you the best and the brightest in the world, okay? I seek them out because I want you to be ahead of the game because we're what? We're brains, right? All right? So check this out. We're going to be talking about grief recovery. Now, that's a big $25 title. What does that mean in today's environment? Thousands and thousands. I mean, you wake up in the morning, another 800 people are dead.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So this is way out of control. Okay? You can't do nothing but hold on. So we need to be smart. But what about these people that can't say goodbye to their family members? What about hospice care? What about on dialysis? What about people that are getting their cancer treatment? It's just so many things and lost in other ways. So Jay's going to talk to us about that. He's definitely going to fill in the white spaces. And then Carolyn, if they're not doing that, they done slipped off and started drinking. I heard domestic violence is up. You know, people are, instead of coming together, they going nuts, being confined. You know, you're going to talk to us a little bit about what the triggers are. And, you know, how can we get away from the urge? Because it's on us. It's the monkey is on our back. Remember, they used to say that in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
For heroin junkies, you know, the monkey was on your back. Well, I tell you, we got a gorilla. Okay? And we are going in. Brains, let me introduce you again to Dr. Carolyn Ross. Tell us a little bit about you, my special friend.
Okay. Thanks, April. It's so good to be back with you. I think it's been years now since I was on your show.
Who does that?
Yeah, exactly. But as you know, I specialize in treating eating disorders and addictions. And as you know, I have a program that's online for people with obesity and binge eating disorder. And as you mentioned, you know, I think there's so much going on right now that when I talk to my patients, people are just so anxious and they're feeling so overwhelmed emotionally. And sometimes, and I know Jay is going to talk about this, but sometimes you don't even realize that you're experiencing what I think is more of a cultural grief. You know, yesterday I woke up in the morning just with tears in my eyes, and I haven't lost anyone, but I think we're all feeling that sense of loss. And some people are turning to food. You know, there's a hashtag trending about, you know, something to do with COVID dieting or the COVID-15 weight gain. And people are joking about it. But for those who struggle with binge eating disorder or bulimia, this kind of stress can lead to a relapse in their behaviors, as well as you mentioned, you know, drinking, relapsing on alcohol or drugs. Can also be a way that people are coping. So I think the first thing that we've really got to do is acknowledge that this is a hard time for all of us. This is not, you know, this is not every day as usual in our lives.
No, really, it's not.
It's not. And I think people think that they should be able to deal with this, that they, you know, then they feel guilty because they're not dealing with it in the way that they thought they would. But I think we have to acknowledge and tell the truth that this is an overwhelming time. No, you know, I'm talking online with therapists who are overwhelmed because their patients are coming to them with anxiety and depression and relapse. And then they're overwhelmed because they're worried also about their families and what's happening in their families. So I think the first thing to do is just for all of us to realize that this is an epic moment in our history, and it's normal to feel the way that we do.
Right, you got to feel your feels, whatever that is, and you got to sit with them so that you understand the learning here. This is not for shit and giggles, brains. Too much is going on, okay?
Yeah, right.
Too much is going on.
Yeah.
You know, this is just crazy. So you just better hold on and try to get right, you know, the best you can, whatever that right looks like. Jay, tell us a little bit about grief recovery and loss. You know, it's a whole lot of loss.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and thank you for using that word. That's what grief is about. Grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss, the change in familiar patterns. And it does not have to have anything to do with death and dying, although that's a big component of it. So right now, we have all of the normal dying that goes on, accidents, illnesses, 200 deaths a day related to overdose, 150 deaths a day related to suicide, all on top of the COVID-19, the corona deaths. And to magnify the difficulty of that, people aren't able to travel to someone who's sick. They're not able to get to funerals. And it's very, very difficult. They feel isolated. They feel separated. They feel disappointed. They feel disenfranchised. They feel as though they've let the person down or the family down that is caring for someone who's dying, or the dying person themselves. And on top of that, we have all of the other kinds of grief. The loss of divorce, of moving, of internal losses. I've lost my faith, my hope, my motivation, my inspiration, my dignity, my self-respect, those kinds of losses. And the external losses. I've been planning my prom, my graduation. I was supposed to start a new job. I was moving to another city or into a new home. And now that opportunity has evaporated.
Yeah.
People who've gone to school for 12 years, ready to graduate high school, go to their prom and go to graduation, are not going to have that opportunity, or at least not now. So there's a tremendous amount of loss, and it's tied to, or can drive, not cause, but can be associated with and drive both substance abuse and suicide. We know in the elderly, the two primary drivers of substance abuse are loneliness and grief. And we certainly know that suicide, there are 14 different types of suicide, but certainly when we see loneliness and grief in the elderly, suicide is not a surprising outcome.
Mm-hmm. I think people are also struggling, April, with the uncertainty. You know, if we knew that we had to endure this process for 30 days or 60 days, I think it would be easier to, say, okay, well, I can get through this. It's only going to be this period of time. But I think the uncertainty is making people even more stressed and upset. My granddaughter, as you may know, is on her gap year, and she's kind of stranded in Australia, if that can be a stranded thing. But their head of state has said to them, prepare for 6 months. And that's what we need to prepare for. And I think particularly in the United States, we're getting such conflicting messages that it's unclear how we can prepare. Like, should we be stocking up for a month, a week, 3 weeks? And I think
war, Carolyn, you need to fill up the canteen from top to bottom, all the toilet paper and paper towels you can get.
So now I know who's stockpiling toilet paper.
No, but I'm not making light of it, but I think of my friends. I've got some real high profile friends down there in New York City, and they're looking over into Times Square, and it is a makeshift war zone.
Yeah.
It is a makeshift hospital. It's a morgue.
Yeah.
This is something out of a freaky science fiction movie.
Yes,
So
totally.
what do you say to the people? Now, both of you have a lot of, brains, and you've worked with a lot of brains and taught. What do you say to people that have a conspiracy theory about all of this? Because that's heavy out there in the blatosphere. Do you think sometimes conspiracy theories, lies, or embellishments really make an impact?
I think they make a terribly negative impact. I don't think conspiracy theories, whether they're true or not, help us when we're struggling with something that's so nebulous, so deadly, so overwhelming. Even the Queen of England came out and did a broadcast to encourage her people. And that's what we're missing in America. We don't have that encouragement that, hey, we can get through this together. Hey, we're all in this together.
Yes, we do, right here on the edge.
Yeah, but just as there are 50% of Americans who have a family member or a close friend who've experienced addictions now, especially opiate addictions.
Right.
A year from now, we'll have so many people who have experienced deaths from COVID too. And, that's a startling, realization. And I'm sure.
Yeah, because there's going to be PTSD, off the bat. I've experienced some social anxiety. I was a little tense. You're looking at people kind of crazy. You're not speaking. You're talking through the device, and it happens so quick. That's really what's scaring me. So, Jay, you've worked with a lot of spiritual leaders, a lot of people in the clergy. What do we say to believers?
Yeah. Well, let me go back to the question you asked a minute ago. What do you say to conspiracy theorists? And what I find, because they're very passionate and very attached to what they're saying. And so rather than argue, I just say, well, that may be so. But let me ask, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What are you doing to help your neighbor? And so the conspiracy theory becomes a red herring. It's just something to distract them from what's important, which is what are you doing and how are you helping others? Right. And I always try and bring the conversation back to that.
Well, I bring that up because, that's a lot that goes on in the background, what they say with governments, is that conspiracy theory. So I was just trying to get a better understanding for that. Okay, and then again, Jay, what do you say to, my previous question? I mean, what do you say to people? It's just...
I'm a little country, so there's a country artist named Gary Allen who has a great song, Every Storm Runs Out of Rain. And in AA, we say, this too shall pass. And it's the same message from that song and from the AA thing. This will end. And it will morph, it will change, and it will be very different than it is right now, and certainly not as limiting. And I think back to that period, those 14 years between 1981 and 1995. In 1981, we identified HIV and AIDS, and almost everyone who got AIDS died. Not everyone, but almost. And then in 95, we found the protease inhibitor class of drugs, and suddenly AIDS became a serious and chronic illness rather than a fatal terminal illness. And we turned that corner, and it was, so we can look back, and we would be well advised to look back at where our shortcomings were in the early 80s in addressing that, what we did right and what we did wrong, because I believe there are lessons that we can learn from that. And I will tell you that
You
at
know, it
that
always
time,
seems, I'm sorry to interject, but it seems like it comes from a particular region, you know, like,
another red herring. Where it came from is of interest to scientific people,
right, but it's
but
irrelevant.
it's here. HIV was here, whether it originated in another continent or not.
And actually, HIV, patient one for HIV, I believe, was a Canadian guy who traveled a lot. So I agree with Jay. I don't think that's what's important. I think what's really important is to encourage people to look at how can, as Jay said, how can I take care of myself during this? Instead of rushing, you know, like I talk to patients who are just frantically rushing around, they're constantly worrying, they're just in movement. And I think the lesson from this pandemic is to not rush around, to not try to keep things normal, to let go and surrender and just, you know, kind of take advantage of this time to rest, to reflect. I mean, I find myself, I'm much more tired doing much less than I was way before the
Wait a minute,
pandemic.
girl, and I done lost 5 pounds. I'm just as
Well, I think many of us are eating less. I know for me, I don't want to have to go to the grocery store. So,
But well, now let me talk to you a little bit about that, you know, about the addiction, okay? Because you work with people that have challenges with food on both sides,
yeah,
the overeater or the undereater. You know, some people, every time they walk past the refrigerator, it's calling their name.
yes.
You know, how do we control our urges?
You have, again, it goes to what you said, which is we have to feel those feelings. So the reason people turn to food and the reason they turn to alcohol too, you know, all the people who stockpiled alcohol at the beginning of the pandemic is because they have a difficult time experiencing and feeling their feelings. So whatever you're feeling now is normal. You want to normalize it. You want to allow it to come up and move through you. And you want to, you know, and look for other ways of dealing with the fear that you have besides turning to food. But the most important thing is just allowing yourself to feel these feelings. The nation is grieving. You know, the world is grieving.
The world is
The
grieving.
world is grieving, and we should allow ourselves to feel that grief.
What do you think about this? All these weed smokers. Now, you know, the weed smokers, and yeah, I'm calling you out, the vapors, the cigarette smokers. This is a respiratory disease, really? You need all the lung capacity you could use. I just don't get it. Now that, you know, again, people think that it's the new normal. You have to have some boundaries. I don't care what you do.
Well, certainly the weed industry is seeing a big boom. And again, I think it's a way that people are reaching out because they're desperate to not feel the anxiety they're feeling, to not feel the fear. So I have compassion because it is a fearful time. People are losing their jobs, their incomes are dropping. No one knows, you know, like, you know, I have a son who works in the restaurant industry. His restaurant is closed. So no one knows how long they'll be out of work. No one knows how they're going to make their next, you know, rent payment or electrical bill payment or whatever it is. So, I mean, I think the time now is for us to have compassion both with ourselves and with other people. And that self-compassion is just giving yourself a break. You know, okay, if the refrigerator called to you and you had a binge, that's in the past. Now what are you going to do today?
Right.
Today, get up, eat your regular meals,
Right.
you know, and don't judge yourself. And that's what I think is most important.
Well, don't judge yourself and don't judge others. The idea of like, why is that guy going out just to buy paint? That's not essential. Why is it? Well, maybe he knows if he doesn't go and get some wood and nails and paint and do something and have a sense of accomplishment, that he's going to pick up a bottle. And he hasn't done that for 4 years. So we don't know what somebody else is going through. We don't we're not walking in their moccasins, as it were. And therefore, sitting and judging them is not informed and is not helpful. All we can do is take care of ourselves, set the example, and to whatever degree possible, go ahead and help others. And realize that as we have this sense of loss, of certainty, of control, even if they were illusions, I had the illusion of control, the illusion of certainty, I've still lost it. We have to realize that in this culture, we're taught how to acquire things from infancy, how to acquire attention and affection and allowance, toys, friends, education, careers, family. We're not taught how to lose things, how to let go of things. And that leaves us ill-equipped when we have things that we are losing. And at the same time, we're taught a set of myths about grief that are not helpful. To not feel bad, to replace the loss. Oh, honey, don't feel bad. On Saturday, we'll get you a new one when you lose your bicycle or your dog runs away. And that works right up until grandpa dies and there isn't a grandpa store to replace the loss. And then we're taught things like grieve alone and stay busy and compare the loss and just give it time. And they don't work. And so what happens is we have an accumulation of grief wounds from most of our life. Most of them have not been processed. And now we have new losses on top of that and no chance to go out and do the things that distract us from our feelings. So our feelings become magnified, become more present, and we're more aware of them because we're sitting right next to them.
Wow.
The other aspect, I'm sorry, go on, April.
No, I said, again, what I'm hearing you both say is, you have to feel the feels, okay? This is very uncomfortable. We're all in it together. We're all scared. Drugs and alcohol can be one of many things. I think of other people with medical conditions that can't get the medical attention. I'm seeing in the newspaper that African Americans, just a quick check mark, we're just flying off the shelf. So what do we do moving forward? Just how do we just settle in the moment? Just give me, each one of you, give me just a powerful takeaway.
Well, one takeaway I have is that focusing on self-compassion and compassion for others, the Buddhists have a meditation called the loving kindness meditation. And I'm happy to provide, a link to that meditation for your viewers, but it's a wonderful way of practicing compassion. Another way is just to do deep breathing exercises. Just get up in the morning and, take 10 deep breaths and start your day with that. And the last piece is to leave the past behind you. Whatever happened yesterday or didn't happen yesterday, move forward without thinking about what you did or didn't do before. Stay in the moment, in other words. Be present right now instead of worrying about, I know it's hard, but worrying about the future is not going to change it, and worrying about the past won't either. So
you want some good music and cut you some flowers, burn you some incense.
There you go.
Okay, just relax, take a bubble bath. When's the last time you guys took a bubble bath? Lighten the load. Jay?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. I've switched most of my business with grief recovery to doing it online. And as an advanced grief recovery specialist, I have the ability to work with people one-on-one online, and I'm doing that, and I'm doing it at a greatly discounted rate for the rest of this year, calendar year, for all of 2020. The little things within the house I think that are absolutely essential are get up and get dressed. Take a shower, comb your hair, shave, do whatever it is, and put clothes on. Then have a schedule. that says, I'm going to do this at this time and this at this time. I'm going to get some exercise. I'm going to eat at these times. I'm going to do some reading or some writing or some work, so that the day doesn't just disappear with you sitting in front of, at the best, Netflix, and at the worst, the news.
Oh, yeah.
Turn the news off. Maybe you want to watch it 15, 30 minutes a day, but to sit there and consume the talking heads' opinions of what we're doing as we careen off the edge is not helpful.
No.
You know, I had a friend who said, I couldn't believe I put on like 12 or 15 pounds. And I think it's because I was wearing sweats. I had no idea I was getting heavier until I actually got dressed and my pants felt tight. So some of what happens within our homes is just mindlessness. It's not practicing a mindful meditation or a mindful approach to what we're doing.
Right.
I just want to quickly say, for people who have been struggling with eating or overeating or binging, you know, I recommend, no matter what happens, eat your 3 meals a day. And even if you had a binge yesterday, get up the next day, prepare your 3 meals a day. And they may be small meals, they may be bigger meals, whatever you do, eat regularly throughout the day, because when we have low blood sugar, that makes our emotions more magnified. And when we're hangry, that also makes our emotions more magnified.
Right.
So eat regularly throughout the day, move your body, even if it's just dancing in your house. And I agree with Jay, have a schedule. And the schedule for meals is probably one of the most important. And the second most important is the schedule for sleep. Don't stay up. You know, I fell into this. Don't stay up till 2 a.m. watching Netflix, because it just starts a pattern.
Netflix a bad name. Netflix is the business.
Well, watching TV, let's put it that way. Don't stay up watching TV.
Exactly. Pick up a good book, and both of you have excellent books. Where are they? Jay, Westbrook. Yeah, hold it. Now, you know what, Jay? Hold it up just a little bit. Pull it back a little bit. Yes.
Oh my goodness, I had to go get mine.
Look at that.
There you go.
Jay Westbrook, tell us a little bit about your book, and then Carolyn, I'm gonna have you tell us a little bit about yours, and then how to get in contact with you.
Okay. So my book is called Compassionate Journeys, Lessons from My Work with the Dying.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
It is 28 standalone stories, each of which illustrates a tool for co-journeying with the dying. And it is great to use with people who are dying, with their families, and with professional clinicians, be they professionals or students of medicine, nursing, psychology, chaplaincy, any of those. And it's available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Put it up one more time so they can see it.
Compassionate Journeys, Lessons from My Work with the Dying.
You know, Brains, I'm telling you, that is the way he told the stories are just amazing. From a cultural experience, from a sexuality perspective, it's just amazing. It's amazing. It really is. It's a must read. All right, now, Dr. Carolyn Ross.
Yes, I have the Food Addiction Recovery Workbook. I also have 2 other books. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy here, but the Emotional Eating Workbook is available, as is the Binge Eating Disorder Workbook. We haven't talked about how this trauma will be affecting future generations, but as you know, April, I just did a TEDx talk on intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, that's right. Phenomenal. So
I hope your listeners will check that out.
You gotta call them brains.
Hope your brains will check it out. And I also mentioned that I would make available I have 2 free meditations to help reduce your stress. Wow. And you can just go to bit.ly/CRossMD. And my website is just under my name, CarolynRossMD.com. So.
And Brains, I started the workbook. No, I admit I didn't finish it, but I didn't really realize the psychological part of the food and what I did. So I did learn something. You know, I did learn something.
You can still finish it, you know, April.
I know.
Now that you have so much spare time.
No, I don't, because I'm out here in the bladosphere looking for people to bring to my brains. And I brought the best and the brightest. I adore both of you so much. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your, your commitment to, helping others and selflessness. And you're just awesome sauce. Okay?
Thank you. Thanks for having us, April.
All right.
I so appreciate having shared the stage with both of you. Thank you.
You too, Jay. It was great to meet you virtually.
Bye, brains.
Bye.